I was arranging roses when he walked in. Dark suit, Italian leather shoes, a beard that shadowed his jaw like something deliberate. He was handsome in a way that made me forget, for a moment, that I didn't trust handsome men. He asked for something specific, a color that didn't exist. I told him which flowers could approximate it, and we fell into the kind of conversation I had with customers who actually understood aesthetics, not just color. We were discussing arrangements when Mike appeared beside him, holding out a leather briefcase. "These men gave me this," my son said, his voice small and uncertain in a way that made my stomach tighten. The man went very still, his entire body locked. "Who gave it to you?" His voice was calm, controlled, but something underneath that calm terrified me in a way I couldn't explain. "Two men," Mike said. "Outside. They said to give it to you." The man's eyes moved toward the windows, toward the street, toward the crowd of Saturday shoppers I could see passing by. His jaw clenched, and in that moment, I saw something shift in his face. A recognition, a calculation, a decision being made in the space of a single breath. In one fluid motion, he grabbed my arm and pulled us both toward the door. "Move. Now." His grip was firm but not cruel. His urgency absolute. I didn't understand what was happening. I only knew we were running. Then the explosion came, and understanding didn't matter anymore. The blast threw me backward. I hit the pavement hard, gasping, unable to breathe, the world spinning into fire and sound. For one terrible moment, there was only darkness and noise and the absolute certainty that I was going to die. Then I heard screaming. Not my scream, someone else's. People on the street losing their minds around me. I didn't think about the shop. I didn't think about my business or my flowers or anything I owned. There was only one thought in my mind, repeating like a prayer. "Mike. Mike." I pushed myself up on my hands and knees, searching the chaos, the smoke, the confusion. Where was he? He had been beside that man. That man had pulled us out, had made us run. But where was Mike now? "Where is he?" I was gasping, panicked, my voice not sounding like mine at all. "Where is my son?" The man who had pulled us from the shop was there, his arm on my shoulder steadying me. "Here." His voice was calm, controlled, like he was answering a simple question and not standing in front of a burning building. He gestured toward the edge of the crowd. A second man was kneeling beside Mike. My son was standing, physically unharmed, his eyes wide and shocked, but alive. He was alive. I staggered toward him, still unable to believe it, unable to stop shaking. I pulled him against me, checking his arms, his face, looking for any sign of injury. "Mike, baby, are you hurt? Are you okay? Mommy?" "I'm okay," he whispered, his voice small and confused. "I'm okay." Only when I was absolutely certain that my son was alive and uninjured did I look back toward the shop. Only then did I let myself see what had happened. Petals and Stems was burning. The storefront window had shattered completely, flames rising from inside, visible from the street. The back wall, the wall that held my apartment above, was collapsing inward in sections. Everything I had built, every careful arrangement, my home, Mike's bed, his toys, every photograph of his father that I had kept, all of it burning. I held Mike tighter, unable to move, unable to process the loss. The man who had pulled us from the building was still there, burned along his left arm, his suit singed black, a cut bleeding down his temple, but his eyes were perfectly calm, completely unmoved by the chaos around him. He wasn't looking at the flames. He was looking at the crowd, at the street, at something beyond us, already calculating, already moving forward. In that moment, I understood something that terrified me more than the explosion itself. This man had known. He had known there was a bomb. He had known when it would detonate. He had moved without hesitation because he had already seen this moment before it happened. He was far more dangerous than the fire destroying everything I owned. We were still standing on the street when the cars started arriving. I didn't notice them at first. My mind was too fractured, too focused on Mike's breathing against my chest, on the fact that he was alive, that we had survived. Then the sound registered. Engines. Multiple engines. Getting closer from every direction at once. Not police sirens. Not emergency vehicles. Something else entirely. I looked up toward the intersection. Black cars were turning onto the street in formation. SUVs. All identical. Moving with military precision. They came from both directions, surrounding the block systematically, cutting off every exit. 1, then 5, then 10, then more than I could count. 50 or more, maybe. I couldn't tell anymore. They just kept coming, filling the street like a tide of polished black metal. Men emerged from the vehicles. Not police, not firefighters. Men in dark suits moving with purpose and coordination. Some of them were armed, weapons visible, unashamed. They moved through the crowd of shocked bystanders with absolute authority, establishing a perimeter around the burning building. 200 people. Maybe more. I couldn't count. They simply materialized, organized themselves, and took control of the entire block in minutes. The firefighters and police who had begun to respond to the explosions suddenly seemed small, overwhelmed, unsure of their role anymore. The man who had saved us was no longer beside me. He had moved to the center of the chaos, and now the men in suits were circling him, waiting for direction. Every single one of them seemed to be looking to him, asking silent questions with their eyes, waiting for his command. He stood in the center of the inferno, the burning building behind him, his men surrounding him. The street transformed into something that looked like a military operation and gave orders. I couldn't hear, but I could see the effect. Men ran to their vehicle, others moved deeper into the perimeter. Radios crackled with activity. The entire block had shifted from chaos to absolute control in the space of minutes. I realized, standing there with Mike in my arms, that I was watching power itself move into action. Not the power of authority or position, the power of someone who had built an organization so disciplined, so loyal, so large, that they could respond to a crisis like this with no confusion, no hesitation, no questions. The man turned and looked directly at me across the chaos, across the burning building, across all the organized violence now moving through the street. His eyes found mine through the smoke in the distance, and in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that whoever this man was, he had the resources and the authority to do absolutely anything. He walked toward us, his suit still smoking, blood still trickling down his temple. Behind him, his men moved to secure the perimeter completely, keeping the firefighters and police at a distance, preventing anyone from getting too close to the burning shop. "You're coming with me," he said. Not a question, a statement, a command that was already being executed by the men around us, who were creating a path, a vehicle, a way out. I didn't have a choice. We didn't have anywhere else to go. But even if I had refused, I realized now that refusal was no longer an option. This man didn't ask. This man didn't negotiate. This man took what he decided he needed. And for reasons I didn't understand, he had decided that we were necessary. The car was nothing like I expected. Not ostentatious, not lined with luxury that screamed money and power. It was clean, organized, precise, black leather seats, tinted windows, the kind of vehicle designed to be invisible while containing everything necessary. Adriano sat across from me. That's when I learned his name, not from him but from one of his men who had opened the car door and nodded to him with deference. Adriano. Just that. Like everyone knew exactly who he was with a single name. Mike was beside me, small and quiet, still in shock. Adriano looked at my son for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression, a tension I hadn't seen before. Like seeing Mike triggered something he had been holding back. "He was in the shop," Adriano said. His voice was different now, harder. "When the briefcase was delivered." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes. He was playing. He could have died." The words hung in the air between us. He wasn't stating the obvious. He was stating something else. Responsibility, guilt, rage at the fact that a child had been put in danger. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice was steady, but it was costing me everything to keep it that way. "What organization do you—" "Damn trinket," he said, cutting me off. "Calabresa, my territory. My rules. This happened in my territory, which means it was a violation. A message." I didn't know what that meant, but the way he said it made it clear that it meant everything, that his territory, his rules, his authority had been challenged, and that challenge had almost killed my son. "Who sent the bomb?" I asked. "Someone who thought I was weak enough to scare, someone who thought using a child would teach me a lesson." He leaned forward slightly. "They were wrong on both counts." I understood, in that moment, what I was looking at. This wasn't a businessman, or a crime boss in the way I had imagined it. This was a man whose entire identity was built on control, on precision, on rules that no one broke without consequences, and someone had broken those rules, in his territory with a child. "Why did you save us?" I asked. "You didn't know us. You didn't owe us anything." Adriano's eyes moved to Mike, then back to me. The child was innocent. Children are off limits. That's the only rule that matters. That's the rule that separates us from chaos. He said it like he believed it. Like his entire world was built on that single principle, and everything else, the violence, the control, the organization of 200 armed men flowed from that one absolute rule. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you stay under my protection until this is resolved. You, your son, anyone else who survived, no one touches what's mine. Not anymore." "I'm not," I started to say. "I'm not yours." But I stopped, because we weren't. My shop was destroyed. My apartment was ashes. I had nowhere to go, no money except what was in my purse. No options at all. "You have no choice," he said, reading my hesitation. "Your former life is gone. Your shop is destroyed. You have no income, no home, no security. I'm offering you all three." "And in exchange?" I asked. "You stay close. You obey my rules. You don't ask questions about my business. And you never ever put yourself or your son in danger again by refusing protection you can't afford." It was delivered like a proposition, like a business deal. But it wasn't. We both knew it. This was a man telling me that I belonged to him now. Not through choice, but through circumstance and necessity. "If I refuse, you won't," he said simply. "Because you're a mother, and mothers don't refuse safety for their children. Mothers sacrifice everything else for that safety. I'm counting on that." He was right. He knew he was right. I knew he was right. And in that moment, sitting in the back of that car with Mike asleep against my shoulder, watching my entire life burn in the distance, I realized that the man who had saved my son had also trapped me. Not through cruelty, through perfect understanding of exactly who I was and what I would do to protect the only thing in the world that mattered. His home was nothing like I expected. I had imagined something ostentatious, something that screamed wealth and power and dominance. Instead, it was restrained, expensive, yes, but elegant in its simplicity. Modern furniture in neutral tones, no unnecessary decoration, everything had a purpose, everything had a place. It was almost like walking into my own apartment. If my apartment had been designed by someone with unlimited resources and an absolute need for control. A woman who introduced herself as Lucia met us at the door. She was maybe 60, with gray hair pulled back tightly and an expression that suggested she had seen everything and judged nothing. She took one look at Mike and swept him away to a room down the hall. "Come, Piccolo, let's get you cleaned up." Mike went without resistance. He was still in shock, still processing everything that had happened. I watched him disappear around the corner and felt the last thread of stability slip away. Adriano stood in the entrance to the main room, watching me process his home, his life, the space he was now asking me to inhabit. "You'll stay in the guest wing," he said. "There are clothes there that might fit you. Food if you're hungry. Your son will have his own room adjoining yours. Lucia will take care of both of you during the day." "And you?" I asked. "I have business to attend to. The people responsible for the bomb need to be dealt with. That will take time." I wanted to ask what dealt with meant. I wanted to know who had sent the bomb and why, but I realized I didn't actually know anything. Not why my shop had been targeted. Not who wanted to hurt him. Not what I had walked into by simply opening my doors on a Saturday morning. "There are rules," he said. His voice had taken on that formal quality again, the one that suggested he was establishing code. "You don't leave this house without permission. You don't contact anyone outside these walls. You don't go into the West Wing, the basement, or my office. You keep your son close. You follow the schedule Lucia gives you." I heard what he wasn't saying. "You don't call the police. You don't talk to investigators. You don't tell anyone where you are or who I am." "What about the authorities?" I asked carefully. "They'll want to question me about what happened, about the explosion." "They will," he said, "but you won't speak to them. Not yet. You're in shock. You're grieving. You need time before you're ready to give statements." "For how long?" "Until I decide it's safe. Until I decide they won't find out why this happened. Until I decide they won't trace this back to my world. Until I decide the narrative is controlled." "People will look for me," I said. "Friends, customers, the landlord." "I've already handled the landlord. As for friends and customers, they have no reason to suspect you're not somewhere safe, being cared for." What you are. He paused. Anyone who comes looking will find that Petals and Stems was destroyed and its owner is missing, presumed dead or injured and hospitalized. My stomach dropped. You're telling people I'm dead? I'm telling them nothing. The authorities will draw their own conclusions. Missing person, likely victim of the explosion. No body recovered. The investigation will focus on the source of the explosion, not on locating you. Which meant no one would be looking for me. Which meant no one would find me. Which meant I had disappeared from my life as completely as if I had died in that shop. How long? I asked again. How long will I need to stay here? Until it's safe. Until I find out who sent the bomb and why. Until I decide that the threat is resolved. That could be weeks. Months. Yes, he said simply. It could be. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to tell him that I needed to contact someone. That I needed to report the explosion. That I needed my insurance company to know I was alive. But I also understood what he was really telling me. If I talked to the police, if I explained what I knew about the bomb, if I told them about the men who had given it to Mike, I would be dragging myself deeper into something I didn't understand, and he would no longer be obligated to protect me. What about my life? I asked. My business, my apartment, my voice broke. Everything I had is gone. Your shop, he said. The building, your apartment, all of it is a total loss. Your insurance won't cover this. Explosions fall under acts of terrorism. Your policy specifically excludes them. I felt something crack inside me. Of course it wouldn't. I had known that when I signed the policy. I had thought it was an unlikely scenario. I'll handle it, he said. The building, the repairs, your debts, everything. You don't have to worry about money. Why would you do that? Because your son is innocent. Children shouldn't pay for wars between adults. He paused. And because right now, you have nowhere else to go. It was said without cruelty, but it was the truth hanging between us like a blade. I had no apartment. I had no job. I had no money to rebuild. My savings were modest. Enough for emergencies, not enough for this. My parents were dead. I had no siblings. Mike had no father. We were alone in the way that only people without safety nets truly understand. And he was offering us shelter. Offering us protection. Offering us a home. At the cost of my freedom. If I try to leave? I asked. You won't, he said. Not because of consequences, but because of certainty. Like he knew me well enough already to know that I would stay, that I would be the perfect guest, the perfect prisoner, because I would rationalize every boundary as protection for my son. And if the police find me, if someone reports a missing woman and they discover I'm here, they won't. No one knows this address. No one knows about you. As far as the world is concerned, you're too traumatized to be found. He moved toward the door. Rest. You're safe here. Your son is safe here. That's all that matters now. And the terrible thing was, he was right. It was all that mattered. My freedom, my independence, my life, all of it was worth nothing compared to Mike's safety. So I stayed. Because I had nowhere else to go. Days passed. Or maybe a week. Time moved differently in that house. There were no windows in the guest wing that faced the street. No way to know if it was raining or sunny. If the city was moving on without me or if it had stopped to mourn the woman who had disappeared in a fire. Lucia brought meals at regular intervals. Breakfast at 8, lunch at 1, dinner at 7. The schedule was perfect, predictable, organized like everything else in Adriano's world. Mike settled into it quickly. Children are adaptable. He had a room with toys that had appeared overnight, a bathroom with his things. A routine. Lucia was kind to him in a way that required nothing from him except obedience. I tried to follow the schedule too. I tried to stay in my room, to read the books that had been provided, to pretend that I was a guest and not a prisoner. But the walls felt thin, the air felt recycled, and I could hear his men moving through the house at odd hours, hear conversations in the hallway, hear the careful control of a world that operated on rules I didn't understand. On the 4th day, I broke the first rule. I left the guest wing. I told myself it was to find the kitchen, to ask Lucia something about Mike's allergies. But really, I was suffocating in that room. Really, I needed to see something beyond the 4 walls that had become my entire world. The hallway was longer than I expected. The house was larger than it had seemed. I passed what looked like a study, a formal dining room, a library, everything immaculate. Everything silent. I was beginning to understand that this house was designed for someone who needed complete control over his environment. I found Lucia in the kitchen, and I asked about Mike's allergies, and she answered me with the kind patience that suggested she had known all along that I would eventually come looking for something beyond my room. As I was leaving, Adriano appeared in the doorway. He was different than he had been in his car, or in that first moment when he had pulled us from the burning shop. His suit jacket was gone. His sleeves were rolled up. There was a cut on his forearm that looked infected, and I noticed for the first time that he was moving stiffly, like he was in pain, but refusing to acknowledge it. "You're not supposed to leave the guest wing," he said. Not angry. Just stating fact. "I was looking for Lucia," I said. "You could have called for her. I needed to move." He looked at me for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. A recognition, maybe. An understanding that keeping someone locked away didn't make them cooperate. It made them desperate. It made them break rules. "Your arm," I said. Because I couldn't help myself. I noticed things, details. It was my mind cataloging what was wrong, what needed to be fixed. "It's infected." "It's fine." "It's not. It's red. You're favoring that side. You haven't had it looked at properly." He seemed surprised that I had noticed. "I've had worse." "That doesn't mean you should let it get infected." Before I could stop myself, I was reaching toward him, pulling his arm into the light to see it better. "This needs to be cleaned, properly." For a moment he let me look, and then he pulled away. "Lucia will handle it." "Lucia will do what you tell her to do. That's not the same as what needs to be done." I surprised myself with my boldness. Or maybe I was just tired of being afraid. "Let me help." He looked at me like I had just asked him to do something impossible. Like the idea that I would want to touch him, to tend to him, to help him in any way, was so far outside his understanding of the world that he couldn't process it. "I'll get the medical supplies," I said, not waiting for permission. "Lucia can watch Mike. You're going to sit down, and I'm going to clean that wound, and you're going to tell me if you need stitches." He didn't stop me. I think he was too surprised to stop me. I found the medical supplies in a bathroom cabinet with the same clinical organization as everything else in his house. Clean. Sterile. Exactly what I needed. When I returned, he was sitting on the edge of a kitchen counter, his arm extended, waiting. I cleaned the wound carefully. It needed stitches. I could see that immediately. The infection was surface level, nothing systemic, but if left unattended, it would get worse. I worked in silence, and his arm was steady, his breathing controlled, but I could feel the tension in his body, the way he was holding himself still for me. "You were burned," I said. I had seen the scarring on his left arm in that first moment outside the shop, but now, up close, I could see it was older. Years old, maybe. How did that happen? "A long time ago." "It must have hurt." "Yes." "Did someone help you through it?" He didn't answer for a long moment. "No, I handled it alone." Something in the way he said that made me understand that he had been alone for a very long time, that helping people, or being helped by them, was so foreign to him that even this simple act of me tending to his wound was a violation of his code. "You need stitches," I said. "Professional ones. Not from me." "Tomorrow," he said. "I'll have someone come." When I finished, I stepped back, and he stood. For a moment, we were close. Close enough that I could see the exhaustion beneath his controlled exterior. Close enough that I could feel the heat coming off his body. Close enough that something shifted in the air between us. And then Lucia appeared in the doorway, clearing her throat softly, and the moment broke. "Thank you," he said. And then he was leaving, moving back through the house, back to whatever controlled space he occupied when he wasn't around me. I stood in that kitchen, my hands shaking slightly, understanding for the first time that I wasn't just his prisoner. I was becoming something more complicated, something dangerous, because I had started to care whether he was hurt, and he had started to let me see that he could be hurt. That was when I knew I was in real trouble. It started with raised voices in the hallway. Late at night, I was still awake, lying in the dark, listening to the sounds of the house that I had learned to interpret. Footsteps meant business. Running meant urgency. Silence meant danger. The voices were urgent, controlled, but urgent. I heard Adriano's name mentioned multiple times, and then I heard a word that made my blood go cold. Retaliation. I got out of bed. I shouldn't have. I knew the rules, but I had learned that rules existed to be interpreted, and right now I needed to know what was happening in the world beyond my room. I found Adriano in the study with two of his men. Maps on the table, photographs, all of it spread out like a military operation. When he saw me, his expression hardened. "You need to go back to your room." "What's happening?" I asked. "Nothing that concerns you," but it did concern me. Because the photographs on that table showed faces I didn't recognize, but I recognized the context. I recognized the threat. "The bomb," I said. "You found who sent it?" He didn't answer, which meant I was right. "They're coming," I said. It wasn't a question. "They're not coming," he said, "because I'm going to them." One of his men shifted, and Adriano turned to him with a command that sent them both from the room. When we were alone, he moved toward me. "You're going back to the guest wing. You're going to stay there. You're going to keep your son close, and you're not going to come out until I tell you it's safe." "How long?" "I don't know." It was the first time he had admitted uncertainty about anything. That scared me more than the threat itself. I wanted to ask him what he was planning. I wanted to know if people would die because of the bomb that had been meant for him. I wanted to know if my presence here, my acceptance of his protection, made me responsible for whatever violence came next. But I didn't ask, because I already knew the answer, and I wasn't sure I was ready to know it with certainty. "Mike," I said, "if something happens, nothing is going to happen to your son. I've already made arrangements. If anything happens to me, if anything goes wrong, Lucia will take him somewhere safe. He'll be protected." "But what about me?" He didn't answer. The answer was already clear. I was collateral. I was a complication. I was the woman who had stumbled into his world and become a liability. Over the next 3 days, the house transformed. More men arrived, more cars, more weapons. The controlled, elegant space became something else entirely. A fortress, a war room, a place preparing for violence. Lucia kept bringing meals, but I could barely eat. Mike sensed the tension and became quiet, subdued, the way children do when they understand that something dangerous is happening around them. On the third night, I heard gunshots in the distance. Not nearby, but close enough that I knew this was real, that people were dying, that Adriano was at war with someone, and I had no idea who or why. I should have been terrified. I should have been planning an escape. Instead, I found myself in the hallway at 2 a.m, searching for him. I found him in his office, bleeding from a wound on his shoulder that looked fresh. His shirt was torn. His hands were shaking. For the first time since I had met him, Adriano looked like he was losing control. "You're hurt," I said. "It's not serious." But it was. I could see it in his face. Whatever had happened out there had cost him something. Not just physically, but emotionally. His code, his control, his certainty, all of it was cracking. "What happened?" I asked. "They had more men than expected. They had inside help. Someone I trusted gave them information about my movements. Betrayal." The word hung between us. Betrayal was the one thing his code couldn't absorb. Betrayal meant that his entire system of rules, his entire belief that loyalty could be enforced through discipline and fear, was insufficient. "Did you kill them?" I asked. "The men." "Yes." "And the person who betrayed you?" He didn't answer. But I could see it in his eyes. Whoever had betrayed him was going to die, and Adriano was going to make it personal. That's when I understood something fundamental. I had been thinking of him as a man with a code, a man with rules, a man with principles, but what I was looking at now was something else. A man who believed that violence was justified by his code, a man who had built an entire world on the foundation of absolute control, and was now watching that world fracture. And I was inside that fracture. "You need to leave," he said. His voice was flat, empty. "You and Mike. Lucia will take you somewhere safe." "You're sending us away?" "Yes." "Because of this? Because someone betrayed you? Because I can't protect you and do what needs to be done?" He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something like desperation in his eyes. "I made a mistake bringing you here. I thought I could keep you separate from this. I thought I could have both control and—" He stopped. "And what?" I asked. But he didn't finish. He was already moving, already making calls, already setting in motion whatever came next. By morning, Lucia had packed our things. A car was waiting. Adriano gave me an address, cash that must have been worth thousands, and a phone with only one number programmed into it. "Call me if you need anything," he said. "Call me if you're in danger." "What about you?" I asked. "Don't worry about me." But I was already worried. Because I understood, now that the man who had saved my son was about to do something that would change him permanently. That whatever he did to the people who had betrayed him would fracture something inside him that might never heal. And I was the only person who had touched that fracture and tried to help. The only person he had let see his vulnerability. The only person who might understand what came next. As Lucia drove us away from that house, toward safety, toward a new life in a different city that Adriano had arranged, I understood that he had just made the decision that would destroy us both. He had chosen his code over his humanity, and I had nowhere to go but away from him. The apartment Lucia took us to was in a different city, a place where no one knew us, a place where Emily Rogan, florist and single mother, didn't exist, where she was just another woman trying to start over. Adriano had paid for 3 months. After that, the money he had given me would need to last. I tried not to think about what came after. I tried to focus on finding work, on keeping Mike stable, on pretending that leaving him hadn't fractured something inside me that I didn't know how to fix. But the truth was, I was falling apart. I would lie awake at night and replay the moment he had told me to leave. I would imagine the violence that was happening without me there to see it, without me there to tend to his wounds, without me there to remind him that there was another way to exist besides control and punishment. Lucia had left me with instructions, a job waiting at a flower shop that had been arranged, credentials that were real enough to pass scrutiny, a life constructed entirely by Adriano's resources and Adriano's power. I hated it. I hated the gratitude I felt. I hated the debt I owed. I hated that even though I was free, I felt more trapped than I ever had in his house. Because the truth was simple and undeniable. I missed him. I missed the certainty of his presence. I missed the quiet moments in the kitchen when he let me help him. I missed understanding, for the first time in my life, what it felt like to matter to someone so completely that they would burn their entire world to protect you. Mike struggled too. He had nightmares about the explosion. He had stopped asking questions about Adriano, which was worse than asking. It meant he had accepted that some men simply disappeared from your life, that protection came with the cost of abandonment, that safety meant being alone. One night, 3 weeks after we left, Mike asked me a question that broke something in me. "Is it my fault?" he asked. "Did he send us away because of me?" "No," I said immediately. "No, baby. It's not your fault. It's not about you." But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. Because if Mike hadn't been there, if I hadn't been his mother, if we hadn't mattered to him, Adriano wouldn't have made the choice to let us go. He wouldn't have put himself in danger trying to protect both his world and us. We had been the complication. We had been the vulnerability in his armor. And so he had removed us. I realized, sitting in that apartment with my son sleeping against my shoulder, that I had spent 27 years learning to control my life through perfection. I had spent years believing that if I just did everything right, if I just followed the rules, if I just worked hard enough, nothing bad would happen to me or to the people I loved. And then a bomb had destroyed everything, and a man with a gun and an organization had saved me, and I had fallen in love with him while pretending I was just grateful for his protection. That was my blindness. That was my moral failure. I had convinced myself that I could live in his world without being changed by it, that I could accept his protection without accepting who he was, that I could care for him without becoming complicit in the violence that defined him. But I had. I was. I had watched him prepare for war and hadn't tried to stop him. I had stood in his office and seen him bleeding and hadn't asked him to choose differently. I had let him send me away because leaving seemed safer than staying, safer than fighting for something that I didn't even understand. I was a coward masquerading as a pragmatist. The realization didn't make me feel strong. It made me feel hollow. Because now I understood that by trying to maintain my moral superiority, by refusing to acknowledge what I felt for him, by accepting the safety he offered without questioning the violence that came with it, I had abandoned him in the same way he had abandoned us. I had left when he needed me. I had gone quietly into the night like a good girl following rules, like a perfectionist protecting her own purity by refusing to be tainted by his world. And he had let me go because he believed that I was better than him, that I deserved better than him, that I deserved better than him, that his code, his violence, his dark world was something from which I needed to be protected. But what if he was wrong? What if the person who needed protection wasn't me, but him? What if the person who needed saving wasn't my son, but the man who had decided that love was a weakness that couldn't be afforded in his kind of life? I looked at the phone he had left me. The phone with only one number. I hadn't called it. For 3 weeks I had held that phone like a lifeline and refused to use it. Because calling him meant admitting that I had made a mistake, that I had been wrong about what I needed, about who I was, about what it meant to truly matter to someone. And admission of error was the one thing a perfectionist couldn't do. I set the phone down on the table in front of me and stared at it, in the darkness. And for the first time since leaving him, I let myself cry, not for what I had lost, but for what I had thrown away, because I was too afraid to be anything other than good. I called him on a Thursday morning. I don't know why Thursday. I don't know why morning. I just know that I couldn't wait anymore, that the phone in my hand had become a weight I could no longer carry. He answered on the first ring, like he had been waiting, like he had been holding the phone, expecting my voice, all this time. Emily, he said, just my name, but the way he said it told me everything, that he had been counting the days, that he had been wondering if I would call, that he had been hoping. I need to see you, I said. I'll send a car. No. I surprised myself. I'm coming to you. There was a pause, a long one. And then, you know where I am? No. But you'll tell me. He gave me an address. A hotel. Neutral ground, I realized. Not his house. Not his world. A place where we could meet as something other than prisoner and captor. I arranged for a neighbor to watch Mike. I told him I had business in the city. I didn't tell him I was driving toward the man who had saved his life and then sent us away. I didn't tell him that I was about to do something that violated everything I had built my life on. The hotel was elegant, but impersonal. I gave his name at the desk, and they knew exactly who I meant. They took me directly to a penthouse without question. Money and power open doors. They open elevators. They open the world. When I walked into that room, Adriano was standing by the window, looking out at the city below. He turned when he heard me, and I saw it immediately. The change. He looked worse. Not physically. Physically, he was recovered. The wound on his shoulder had healed, but something inside him had fractured in a way that transcended the body. His eyes were harder. His face was sharper. He looked like a man who had done something that he couldn't undo, and was living with the consequences every single moment. You shouldn't be here, he said. I know. It's not safe. I don't care. Emily. No, I said. You don't get to do that anymore. You don't get to decide what's safe for me. You don't get to send me away because you decided it was the right thing to do. You don't get to make choices about my life without me. He looked at me for a long moment. Is that why you came? To tell me I made a mistake? I came because I made a mistake. I left when I should have stayed. I accepted your protection without accepting who you are. I cared for you and then I pretended I didn't. And now I understand that the person I was judging, the person I thought was broken and violent and immoral, was actually just trying to survive in a world that demands brutality. You don't understand what I did, he said quietly. I know you made a choice. I know someone betrayed you and you decided that the only response was violence. I know you did something that violated your own code, which terrified you more than any external threat ever could. He didn't deny it. He just stood there, accepting my words like penance. I'm not good, I said. I thought I was. I thought perfection and control and moral superiority made me good, but I watched you prepare for war, and I didn't try to stop you. I stood in your office, and I didn't ask you to choose differently. I left when you needed someone to tell you that there was another way to exist besides control and punishment. There isn't another way for me, he said. There is. There has to be. Because if there isn't, then everything I felt for you was built on a foundation that was always going to crumble, and I can't accept that. I won't accept that. I moved toward him. I expected him to pull away. Instead, he stood still, watching me approach like I was the only real thing in a world that had become entirely constructed. I'm not asking you to be good, I said. I'm not asking you to change who you are or abandon your world. I'm asking you to let me be part of it, not as a prisoner, not as someone you protect and then send away, as someone who chooses to stay, who chooses you, knowing exactly what that means. That's insane, he said. Probably. But I'm done being the type of woman who makes safe choices. I'm done pretending that perfection is the same as goodness. I'm done being afraid of who you are when who you are is the only real thing I've ever found. He reached out and touched my face. His hand was careful, controlled, like he was afraid that if he touched me too hard, I would disappear. I did terrible things, he said. To the men who betrayed me, to everyone involved, I did things that violated every rule I built my world on, and I would do them again. To protect you. To protect Mike. I know, I said. And you're still here? I'm still here. Even though it makes you complicit. Even though it makes you part of this world. I was already part of this world. The moment you pulled us from that shop, I was already complicit the moment I let you care for us. I've spent weeks trying to convince myself otherwise, and I'm done. I'm tired of being afraid of what that makes me. He pulled me against him, and for the first time since I had met him, Adriano seemed to breathe like a man who had been drowning and finally reached the surface. I don't know how to do this, he said. I don't know how to let someone matter to me without trying to control them. Neither do I said. But we can figure it out. Together. That's all I'm asking. Not perfection. Not safety. Just you and me trying to build something that isn't built entirely on control or fear. That's not who I am. It's not all of who you are. There's more. I've seen it. In the kitchen. In the way you look at Mike. In the fact that you let me go even though it cost you something terrible. He held me closer, and I felt something in him shift. Not a healing, but an acceptance. An acknowledgement that maybe, for the first time in his life, he didn't have to carry everything alone. What about Mike? He asked. He needs to know that you didn't abandon him. He needs to know that the man who saved his life is someone worth having in his world. And he needs to know that his mother made a choice to be here. That she chose this, chose you. And if people come after you because of me, then we handle it together. No more sending me away. No more protecting me by erasing me. We face it together. He didn't answer with words. He answered by kissing me. And in that moment, standing in a hotel room above the city that he controlled, I understood that we were about to do something that terrified both of us. We were going to try to be human together, in a world that demanded we be monsters. We drove back to his house together, not to hide, not as fugitives, but as a choice, mine and his. And the moment we walked through that door, everything changed. The men who worked for him stopped what they were doing. They watched us arrive together, watched him keep his hand on the small of my back, watched him introduce me, not as the woman he was protecting, but as someone who would be part of his world now. There was no question about what that meant. Everyone understood immediately. Lucia smiled when she saw me. She had known. I realized she had been waiting for me to understand what she had understood from the beginning. That a man like Adriano doesn't protect someone unless they matter, and they don't matter unless he's willing to change. Mike was confused at first. He didn't understand why I had left, and then come back. He didn't understand why Adriano was here, why he was staying, why things were different now. Because I made a mistake, I told him. I thought I had to choose between safety and happiness. But I was wrong. Your safety isn't threatened by Adriano being part of our lives. Your happiness depends on it. Adriano took things slowly with Mike. He didn't try to be a father. He didn't try to replace the man Mike's biological father had been. Instead, he became something else. A presence. A protector. A man who made it clear that anyone who threatened my son would face consequences they couldn't imagine. But he also became something more human. With Mike. He would sit with him and answer questions. He would listen when Mike talked about missing his old life, his old apartment, his old school. He would acknowledge the loss without trying to fix it or minimize it. That was when I knew he was trying. That was when I knew the man who had seemed incapable of anything but control was actually learning how to be vulnerable with people he cared about. 2 weeks after I came back, a woman came to the house. She was introduced to me as someone important in Adriano's organization. Powerful. Intimidating. And when she looked at me, I saw something like approval in her eyes. So you're the one who tamed him, she said. No one tamed anyone, I said. We just decided to try. That's what I mean, she said. He's been waiting for someone to give him a reason to be something other than a weapon. I was beginning to think it wasn't possible. I didn't know how to respond to that. The idea that Adriano had been waiting for me, that I had somehow completed something in him that had been broken or missing, felt too large to hold in my hands. But then Adriano appeared beside me and pulled me against his side, and I understood that it was true, that we had found something in each other that neither of us thought we deserved. Safety, yes, but also acceptance. The acceptance of being seen completely and loved anyway. A month later, I asked him the question I had been afraid to ask. What happened to the people who betrayed you? What did you do? He was quiet for a long time. We were in the kitchen. Lucia had taken Mike to the park. It was just us. I did what I had to do, he said finally. I made it clear that betrayal has consequences, that you can't violate the code and survive in my world. People died. Yes. Because they betrayed you. Because someone told them where you would be. Yes. I should have been horrified. Part of me was. But another part of me understood that this was the price of his world. This was what it meant to live in the space where power and violence intersected. I'm not asking you to be okay with it, he said. I'm asking you to understand that I did what was necessary, and I'm asking you to decide, knowing that, whether you can stay. I'm staying, I said. But you need to understand something too. The woman who accepted your protection without question, the woman who followed your rules and trusted your judgment without asking, that woman is gone. I'm going to ask questions now. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to refuse when I think you're wrong. I know, he said. And you're okay with that? No, he said honestly. But I'm learning to be. Because the alternative is losing you, and I've already done that once. I won't do it again. We kissed in that kitchen, and I felt something settle inside me. This wasn't a fairy tale. This wasn't a story about redemption or transformation or love conquering all. This was a story about two broken people deciding to build something together, knowing that the foundation would always be complicated, knowing that the weight of his world would always be present, knowing that we might fail, but choosing to try anyway. 6 months later, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. I was still working with flowers, but now I was doing it in a shop that Adriano owned. I had rebuilt my business. I had stability. I had security. But more than that, I had someone who looked at me like I was the most important thing in his world. Someone who had learned to let me matter. Someone who had discovered that letting someone love you, really love you, was the only power that mattered in the end. Mike had adjusted too. He had stopped having nightmares. He had started asking questions about Adriano's world, and Adriano answered them honestly, without pretending that the life he lived was anything other than what it was. One evening, as we were having dinner together, Mike asked the question that made me understand how far we had all come. Are you going to marry my mom? He asked Adriano. Adriano looked at me across the table. In his eyes I saw a question, a request, a proposal delivered silently, in the space between us. If she'll have me, he said, and I understood, in that moment, that the woman who had lost everything in a fire had actually found everything, not despite the chaos, because of it. Because she had been forced to surrender the illusion of control, and in doing so had found something real. The story doesn't end there, though. In the Mafia world, stories like ours never really end. There are always new threats, new betrayals, new tests of the code we had built together. But I was no longer afraid of them, because I had learned the most important lesson of all, that true safety doesn't come from control. It comes from having someone who will face the chaos with you, who will choose you even when you're complicated, especially when you're complicated. Adriano had saved my life in a flower shop on a Saturday morning, but I had saved him just by deciding to stay.